The sanctuary was always quietest in the moments before worship began. Stained glass filtered the Texas sun into heavenly shards that fell across the stage where Pastor Robert Morris once stood, a Bible in hand and a promise in his voice. He had founded Gateway Church in 2000 with nothing more than faith and fire, and 2 decades later, it had grown into one of the most powerful megachurches in America, drawing over 100,000 members across multiple campuses. To his followers, Robert Morris wasn't just a pastor. He was a prophet. He was a man who laid hands on presidents, who spoke at national prayer breakfasts, who claimed visions from God. But behind that pulpit smile and the applause of the congregation lay a secret buried for over 40 years. It was a secret that would unravel the reputation of one of the most revered spiritual leaders in the evangelical world, and in doing so, shine a harsh light on the institutions that protected him. The reckoning began in the sweltering heat of June 2024, when a woman named Cindy Clemisher, now in her 50s, stepped into the light. "I was 12, she said in a trembling voice, facing the cameras outside the Osage County Courthouse in Oklahoma, and he was staying in our home as a guest evangelist. He used the Bible to tell me I was special, chosen. Then he started touching me." There were gasps from the reporters, but the real shockwave came days later when Clemisher named her abuser, Robert Morris. Morris didn't deny knowing her. He couldn't. He had been a guest in her family's home in Hominy, Oklahoma, in 1982. At the time, he was a 21-year-old traveling preacher. Clemisher was a trusting child from a devout family. The allegations weren't vague. She gave dates, locations, and described scenes of escalating abuse that spanned for years. First in Oklahoma, then in Texas, where Morris's ministry began to flourish. The fallout was immediate. Morris resigned from Gateway Church within a week. In a brief, carefully worded video posted to social media, he admitted to inappropriate sexual behavior in my early ministry years, but insisted that it did not rise to the level being claimed. It was a calculated statement, meant to show contrition without confessing to criminal acts, but to many it fell hollow. The congregation was stunned. Some wept, others raged. A few refused to believe it, convinced the devil was targeting a man of God. But the truth was more damning than most were prepared to face, and the case was just beginning. In March 2025, the Oklahoma Attorney General's office announced a formal indictment. 5 felony counts of lewd or indecent acts with child. Each carried a potential sentence of up to 20 years. A multi-county grand jury had convened in secret, listening to testimony from witnesses, reviewing evidence spanning decades. The charges painted a dark, consistent pattern of abuse. Morris surrendered to authorities on March 17th, a quiet Monday morning. Cameras captured him walking into the Osage County Jail in a gray suit, head lowered. He posted a $50,000 bond and was released the same day. But the image of the former megachurch pastor, once praised by presidents and governors, now listed as a registered defendant in a child sexual abuse case, ignited a media frenzy. The story drew national attention, not just because of Morris's fame, but because of who he had been to so many. He had served as a spiritual advisor to former President Donald Trump. His sermons aired on national television. He was the author of multiple best-selling Christian books. Yet none of that could shield him now. Investigators dug deeper. More than 30 former church members came forward to describe an environment where questioning leadership was taboo, and complaints were often silenced. Gateway Church, facing increasing scrutiny, tried to stem the bleeding. The elders released a public statement distancing themselves from Morris, though several had resigned in the days following his departure, including his own son. In the church's darkest hour, a second storm was brewing. In September 2024, months before the indictment, Morris filed a claim against Gateway Church, demanding over $1 million in retirement benefits. He cited verbal agreements and a lifetime of service, insisting the church owed him. But Gateway pushed back, claiming any such agreements were contingent on adherence to church policies, and that Morris had resigned under moral failure. They filed a petition to block arbitration, rejecting his demands and painting a picture of a fallen leader clinging to entitlement. The public was divided. Was Morris a disgraced leader facing justice, or a spiritual man caught in a political and cultural crossfire? The truth lay with Cindy Clemisher and the records. Clemisher's story wasn't new. She had tried to speak out in 2007, but Morris's legal team offered a settlement contingent on a non-disclosure agreement. She refused to sign. Instead, she kept journals, letters, and evidence, building her case in silence for years. Her bravery in 2024 was not spontaneous. It was the culmination of decades of trauma and determination. She testified before a Texas legislative committee that summer, advocating for laws to void NDAs in child sexual abuse cases. How many victims have been silenced by churches and ministries that protect predators? She asked. Her words echoed through the marble halls, leaving lawmakers visibly shaken. Back in Oklahoma, the legal battle intensified. At Morris's preliminary hearing on May 9, 2025, his defense attorneys entered a plea of not guilty. They argued the statute of limitations should apply, even though Oklahoma law allows prosecution for child sexual abuse decades later if new evidence emerges. The prosecution fired back with chilling detail. Their evidence included travel records, handwritten notes, witness testimony, and corroboration from family members who had harbored doubts for years but never spoken publicly. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was a letter Morris allegedly wrote in 1984, found in the Clemisher family's attic. It was signed in his handwriting and described a love misunderstood by the world. Experts were called in to authenticate it. The defense attempted to suppress it, citing chain of custody concerns, but the judge allowed it into evidence. The trial was set for September 4th, 2025. Until then, the world would wait and speculate. Meanwhile, Gateway Church struggled to rebuild. Attendance plummeted. Donations fell by nearly 40%. A class action lawsuit was filed by former members alleging financial mismanagement and spiritual abuse. The church had once been a beacon of prosperity gospel, promising that faith would bring riches. Now, its empire was crumbling, built on the charisma of a man whose past was catching up to him. In private, Morris maintained his innocence to loyal supporters. He held closed-door meetings with inner-circle friends. Some remained by his side, convinced it was all a demonic attack. Others quietly disappeared. But for Cindy Clemisher, this wasn't about theology or politics. It was about truth. She told her story again and again, on podcasts, in interviews at survivors' meetings. Each time, her voice grew stronger. She spoke not just for herself, but for those still trapped in silence. They tell you to forgive and forget, she said in one appearance. But you can't forget what was never healed. The prosecution believes other victims may exist, women or men too afraid to speak. The grand jury investigation is ongoing and more charges are possible. Prosecutors have urged anyone with information to come forward. They've also begun examining other ministries Morris worked with in the 1980s, looking for patterns. As the summer of 2025 stretches toward the trial, speculation grows. Will Morris take the stand? Will more victims emerge? Will Gateway survive? Behind the spectacle is a quieter question, a painful one. How many times had the church looked away? In its rise to power, Gateway had embraced Morris's charisma, his stories of redemption, his promises of divine prosperity. But somewhere along the way, the institution forgot to protect its flock. It forgot that sometimes the wolf wears a shepherd's robe. And now, justice waits. The gavel will fall in September. The cameras will return. But for Cindy and for those like her, the story doesn't end in a courtroom. The healing will take a lifetime. The damage cannot be undone. But perhaps, just perhaps, truth can finally have its day. And when it does, the silence that once protected Robert Morris will be shattered by a single voice that refused to be quiet. The trial of Robert Morris is still months away, but the ripple effects are already being felt far beyond the courtroom. What began as a single woman's act of courage has now grown into a full-blown confrontation between truth and power, faith and manipulation. As the legal news tightens and new questions emerge, one has to wonder, was Robert Morris an isolated figure who fell from grace, or just one example of a much deeper rot inside the evangelical empire he helped build? What else lies buried beneath the megachurches, the television broadcasts, and the sermons about forgiveness? Who else knew and said nothing? And perhaps most chillingly, are there others like Cindy, still in the shadows, waiting for someone to believe them? The cameras will be there when Morris takes a stand. The world will be watching. But justice isn't just about what happens in court. It's about whether the voices that were once silenced are finally allowed to speak and be heard. As the pews at Gateway Church sit emptier and the once praised name of Robert Morris becomes synonymous with scandal, we're left to ask, how many more shepherds have been wolves in disguise? And how many more Cindys are out there, wondering if anyone will ever listen? Let us know what you think. Do you believe justice will be served? Should megachurch leaders be held accountable for decades-old crimes? And what does this case say about blind faith in the face of abuse? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This is one story that's far from over.